Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. I'm one of your co hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me is my esteemed colleague, bigger brother from another mother, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing well, little brother from another mother.
Right on. There we go. See, we're making it work today. So, we'd like to welcome all of our viewers and listeners back. If it's your first time, we hope you enjoy this podcast. We hope you get something out of it. And just to let you know how we do this sort of thing, if you're new, is one of us will introduce a topic, kick it over to the other person, and get that other person's thoughts. And we have this conversation, unedited, organic, and sometimes there's technical issues every now and then, but we've been pretty lucky so far. So, with that, our topic for today is the bigger picture. So, like I mentioned, we talk about personal, professional, and career development and how these topics um, interact with each other in those areas. So, this week is the bigger picture and how that interacts with personal, professional, career development. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on the bigger picture?
That's a pretty good question, and I think it could be open ended almost because it does relate to all three of those things you talked about: the career, professional, and personal development. Because we, as individuals, may think that we're doing what we need, say on a personal level. Maybe getting our life in order, and for us, we think everything is okay. But how does that actually relate to your peers, your family, your colleagues? So, that bigger picture, that's exactly what it is. It's thinking much further beyond where you are, where your team is, where you think you are. And I've had experience with that going from an individual contributor to um, a manager or a leader and understanding now, maybe not just your own area that you're concerned with, but now you're concerned with another area that interacts frequently with this other area. And those are things you may not have really been exposed to as an individual contributor. But now you're a leader and you have to be concerned with the bigger picture. Again, going back to the days as an individual contributor, you're thinking everything I do is important and this is the only thing that matters. Well, that's maybe the case for you, but again, your leader, his leader or their leader sees it differently because now they have to understand how your piece fits with the piece next to yours and in another area. So when we talk about the bigger picture, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's much bigger than maybe sometimes we can even fathom that we understand. And in a lot of cases, many of us don't get to see behind that curtain. We don't get to see that bigger picture. So we are sometimes lost in, well, what am I doing? How does this relate to that? And in some cases, you may not even be concerned with that because all you're thinking about is what is in your own world.
Joe, it reminds me of some of the anecdotes that we've shared offline with each other. And one of the ones that I refer to is the the food in the kitchen is a five-star restaurant, but the ship is sinking.
Right.
So it's like, what should I be more concerned about? Just the myopic level with my team, not
Right.
even my department, but my team. As long as they're successful, that's fine.
Yep.
But what's really going on around you? We've talked about situational awareness before, and understanding the impact of what you do and how it impacts other individuals, teams, departments, and organizations positively and
Right.
negatively. Because you may, and I've experienced this, come up with a great way to do something for your team and make it, you know, 10 times more efficient. But then that creates a backlog for other teams and departments because they don't have a solution to complement that. So now it's
Right.
backing up and building up. And yeah, you've got everything done, but what about the other ones? Now they're suffering. Now they're
Yep.
they're not looking good. And a lot of that, especially with technological solutions, um, we have to think about that because you can come up with a great technological solution or a physically organizational solution like on a manufacturing floor, but it may disrupt someone else in that flow.
Absolutely.
Whether
Yep.
it's paperwork flow, whether it's service flow, whether it's manufacturing flow, whether it's flow within your family.
Right.
I'm doing this. I got the car running perfect. Yeah, but the garage door's been broke for 6 weeks.
Right.
So what was more important, having an extra car working that maybe you didn't that's not your daily driver, but the garage door still needs to be fixed. So again, it comes to prioritizing and understanding impacts. It's kind of like
I,
drying the dishes before you wash them.
Well, I think what you just said, I think is really important. The bigger impact,
Hmm.
and again, I don't think a lot of people are privy to that bigger impact. They're just not informed, or they again don't know the whole project or the whole manufacturing. How it works. So I think that's the part I think people struggle with. Like you said, your team may be doing something efficiently better than they were doing it before, but it's at the cost of another department or another area that needed those inputs that you removed from
Hmm.
your team because it made your system more efficient. And I've experienced that same thing, a few years back, working with a team, and they were trying to get to the bottom of or to the root cause of what was happening in this process, and everybody was all in their own areas. About five or six departments were saying, well, we're doing this right, we're doing this right, but what they hadn't done was brought everybody together to
Hmm.
figure out the process from start to finish.
Hmm.
And once they did that, then there was that recognition or understanding of how what we do impacts what you do, and
Hmm.
and that was a learning for most people. So it helps if you understand how you interact, what the impact is. And like I say, most organizations don't have that ability to do that.
Hmm. Yeah, and it reminds me of another project that I was made aware of, and it was rebranding the letterhead. Something so simple as rebranding the
Right.
letterhead with a new logo and style. And the company said, "Oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be, it's going to be so much better." And it was. It looked really cool, really,
Right.
really
Right.
awesome. But they didn't realize it was going to take 6 to 9 months and cost several hundred thousands of dollars, which they did not account for. They thought it was just going to be a
Right.
quick switch and be done. When you rebrand something, that's all your technical manuals, that's all
Right.
your paperwork, all your forms, all your records, everything. I mean, that's just stationery, signs, everything is rebranded, and
Right.
there is a big cost to that. And this company rebranded, and about 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, they thought they came up with a better idea, so they started rebranding it. They rebranded again. Now that just compounded the issue because
Right.
the people that were already rebranding and got it done were like, okay, good, we're good. They have to do it again, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so there's a big cost to that, so when you think about the impacts of something like that, you think it's so small, there's a bigger impact. Who's
Right.
going to do with the rebranding? What if you don't have a marketing department and you leave it on those individual teams to do it? That's in
Right.
addition to their work that they already have. And how many documents are we talking? How many, you know images are we talking? That's a lot of work to do. Is something that seems so small. And that's
Right.
when we talk about the bigger picture.
Right.
Another example, there was a team in the manufacturing environment, and they did circuit cards, and they had one machine that was working at 60% and one at 20%, and one that they could run at 10% if they needed.
Right.
And I was working on this project with them, and I asked them, well, how much, what do you need? Well, we need a new oven to bake these things in. Well, how much is that going to cost? $60,000. What's that going to do? Well, if we get that oven, we can do 3 times the amount of work as these other three put
Right.
together. And I'm like, we'll do it. Well, the department head doesn't want to spend the 60 grand. Do they have it? Oh yeah. What do they use it for? They're not sure yet. But they were behind schedule, over budget, and it was creating a backlog and a delay with several other teams. And I was speaking with the engineer on this, and they said, if we get that one, that's going to put us ahead of schedule, on schedule, get caught up, and be able to do whatever they want us to do. And then if we get an influx, we can actually crank up that one that does 60% and 30% to bring us even better. And it's like, that's the impact. Why not do that? If you have it, it's going to benefit you and the other teams. Talk to these other teams. Maybe they'll be able to contribute a little bit, or really think about what's important. The impact that you're having. You're slowing down several other teams and departments, but at what cost?
So, based on that scenario that you just shared, what was the end result? I mean, did the team come back together and say, "Hey, this is how what you're doing or not
It
doing
was
is
recommended
impacting"?
to purchase the piece of equipment and was shot down. And then at the end of the year, they were still behind schedule, over
Okay.
budget because they had to keep repairing these machines. And they had that extra 60 grand sitting there.
Hmm.
So, and they used it for something else that was not going to help them with that situation. I don't know. Maybe they're using it. They used it for like moving to a different building or something like that. I don't know. But it was something that was not going to help their efficiency and get them where
Hmm.
they needed to be. And that, as working on the project, it didn't make any sense. And when you talk about the bigger picture, we had the ability to see behind the curtain, and there was no reason other than that leader saying no, for no reason. The
Hmm.
only reason is that person could, so they did. And that impacted so many other I think it impacted like five other teams or departments. And it was frustrating for them because they wanted to do their job better.
Right.
But since half their time was repairing these ovens, they were behind and they just didn't understand it. It drove morale down. It was very frustrating. It was frustrating to the other teams. They're like, in the assembly line, we need these. What do we do about it? Well, sometimes you can't do anything about it because of leadership, and that's an is what it is. I mean, you just have to bite that bullet. But when we talk about the bigger picture, we mentioned offline. Are you the bull or are you the china shop? How much collateral damage are you
Right.
leaving to say, hey, I've still got 60 grand in my budget at the end of the year. That's awesome. Look at me. But your team is in shambles and it's negatively impacting other departments.
So that and that probably happens a lot more than we'd like to think.
Mhm.
But that again is a failure because even though you see the big picture, you have the ability to see the big picture, you still choose not to do what's best for, the masses instead of
Yep.
just what's best for you. So that's unfortunate, but again, I'm sure there are organizations out there that have that mindset. If it doesn't affect me directly, in my eyes, then I'm not too concerned with it.
Right.
And that's
Let
the
them figure it out. Let them figure out how to
exactly.
fix the problem.
And that's, so even knowing the big picture or having it and the ability to see it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out great.
Hmm.
It just means, like you said, someone is resistant based on their own needs or, whatever's best for them, which may not be what's best for the organization or the
Right.
entity or the team, which again is um, definitely a it's not a motivator. It's you can present these things to that individual or to the group or to the team and let them know this is the impact of that, and they still choose not to
Yeah.
make those necessary adjustments or changes. That's like I said, you just shared that experience, but I could think of other experiences very
Hmm.
similar to that where that was the case, and it does cause frustration. So I guess one of my questions to you would be: so it sounds like this failed, that that opportunity to improve failed. What do you think we could do as, say we're an individual contributor or we're a small team? How can we improve upon the importance of understanding that big impact? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's something we
I,
can do?
it, I think it gets back to what we've talked about several times, and that's relationship building,
Yep.
communication, situational awareness, and really being involved with other people instead of running with your blinders on.
Right.
Take those few moments to reach out and say, hey, I have an idea. What do you think? Supervisor, team
Right.
member, mentor, colleague, peer from another department. If we did this, what would it do for you guys or not do
Right.
for you guys? You know, and just really being present in the moment and thinking about things instead of just doing the same thing over and over, which in some cases we need to. But if you're trying to improve something, there are a lot of tools out there, processes that are out there that are industry recognized that apply to many industries that can be used to really get to that root cause and understand what can
Right.
we do to make this better.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Part of it is that building those relationships. And that's, I mentioned that team that we developed or created to help the whole process. That's really what it was, starting to build and connect those relationships to understand again how we impact each other, and what may be good for me may not be good for the other part of the team. And you're right. I think it started with that building, starting to build those relationships with other teams that we weren't
Mm-hmm.
as cordial with or that we didn't know enough about. So I think that goes a long way to having a you know, combined effort for understanding versus me against them. But it's
Right.
us against, maybe one lone straggler or something like that. It's a little bit easier to convince
Mm-hmm.
that other entity or that other team, that it's a benefit for all of us. So I think you're right. Building those relationships, starting to understand that awareness, being more concerned with not just your piece of the pie, but how it interacts with other pieces of the pie. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to go from, one environment where it was just about what we did. Then I went to another environment and saw how that interacted with what we did. Then I went to a larger environment, saw, okay, this is how they all work together.
Yeah.
And once you start to get that understanding, you understand what that individual contributor or that person at the lowest level, how they impact the
Mm.
organization as a whole. And again, a lot of people don't get that opportunity to see that. And so there it is a little bit more challenging to help them understand that or see that, especially if they've grown up in the same environment, the same team or same type of team, that don't get to see behind the curtain or, the bigger picture.
Right.
So
Yeah. And this is again where some of that team building comes into play, where, sharing with what your team does with other teams and other
right.
departments
Yep.
and entities, and letting them share, and then understanding how you impact each other
Right.
and what you can do to collaborate to actually come up with potentially a better solution. You might
Yep.
come up with a great solution for your team, but it's going to be to the detriment of another team.
Yep.
If you're communicating with those teams and understanding your needs and impacts, it may not be that grand, solution for your team, but the combined effort for a combined solution may actually be more efficient for both teams.
Absolutely. Well, and that's what I've learned in recent years. The more we can put together more collaborative teams, teams with people individuals from different areas that all interact one way or another, but helping them understand, again, having someone from this department and this department understanding how what they do impacts that other individual. And then they also now have that wealth of knowledge and information that they didn't have before. That's
Mm,
one of the questions I always think of is when people are talking about a new project or new thing, introducing a new thing, are the right people in the room when you're
absolutely.
making those decisions. That's again, it's going to not only affect their department or their organization, but it's going to trickle out into those other areas. So, are you reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, here's our new idea. This is what we're thinking about. We'd like your input. We'd like your feedback. Let us know if we're, on the mark or if we need to make some adjustments or changes." So that's really the time, like you say, with that branding thing. Sounds like they didn't have enough people in the room to make those
No.
decisions that, that affected
Or
everybody.
maybe they did have the right number of people, they just didn't have the right people.
Right people. Exactly. It still could
Because
come down to you could have 30 people in the room, but if 25 of them are from this department and then you got some sprinkled from other departments, that still doesn't add up. It's
yeah,
still about the importance that having the right people in the room
yeah,
at that time when those type of decisions are being made. And then also being open to, if you realize Well, the right people, not all of the right people in the room. Let's extend that, invitation to other people that we hadn't considered before.
Hmm.
Because when you start that process of, building this team or figuring out a new process or trying to improve, that's what you may start to learn is we don't have all the people in the room. We don't
or
have the right people in the
or
room.
we don't have the resources.
Or we don't have the resources, exactly, because this is much bigger than we thought. So I think that's important when you're talking about making organization type changes or department wide changes, that those people are in the room and that you're flexible enough to recognize those things.
Yeah, yeah, and so many organizations, there are some inherent departments that are going to have an impact. Finance is going to be impacted
Yep.
because if it's program based or non-program based, time is money. So if
Right.
I'm not working on my daily stuff and I don't have the bandwidth to take on extra stuff on my plate, where's that coming from? Where's that extra time
Right.
coming from? Where's that
Right.
extra money coming from? And your IT department.
Yep.
Not, 9 times out of 10, those two departments have to be there. Potentially HR,
Yep.
and then your team, and then anyone else who could be impacted. If you're in a service environment, do you have the other service teams there? If you're in manufacturing, do you have the other people along that manufacturing line in there? And when we talk about people, I'm not talking necessarily about the leaders or the senior managers or low level leadership or senior man. I think I just said senior managers. I'm talking about the subject matter experts
Ab-
that
Absolutely.
understand
Yep.
those critical people that know the process as good, if not better, than anyone else
Right.
in that area.
I,
And they
I
may
think,
not have, and they have to have the authority and capacity to help
right.
make decisions.
Yep. And I think you hit on something again. I think we hadn't mentioned before, and it is more the subject matter experts, the people that do it day in, day out, or have the best understanding, not the person who's in charge of that department.
Mm-hmm.
I think you lose in that translation, or trying to talk about, okay, this is a project we're talking about, and you go back to that subject matter expert, and that person that's relaying that message is not fluent enough to relay that message. So you're right, having those experts in the room, the people that know how it operates, how it functions, that can speak to it and not just nod their head and say, sounds like a great idea. And I experienced that as well, being in, team meetings or project team meetings and starting to have conversations about things that people assumed they knew.
Mm-hmm.
People, you know, thought they knew rather than going to the source and saying, hey, what does this actually do? And how
Yeah.
does it actually affect this? And that's what's missing a lot of times. Because again, you may have the people from the right departments in the room, but they may not be the people who actually put their hands on the thing or understand it, down to the lowest, smallest bolt or nut.
Mm.
So that's again, you touched on that. I think we kind of blew past that. So I'm glad you brought that up about the subject matter experts.
Yeah. And I liked what you said about being lost in translation.
Yeah.
That is huge because sometimes it's the small details that make
Right.
the biggest difference. Or if I don't understand what this widget's specific name is,
Right.
that can have a huge impact. So having a air quotes representation in the room doesn't mean it's the right representation,
Right.
like
Yeah.
we're talking about. And I've heard you know management say, well, we can't afford to put that person in the room because they're working on this project. Let so and so go in there and let them relay the information.
Right.
That's a huge detriment. Maybe it's only an
Absolutely.
hour or two, but think about what you're going to be losing, potentially losing, or potentially
Right.
gaining because things weren't translated properly.
Absolutely.
It's
And
that
having,
it's that old game of telephone,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
rumor mill.
And that's what I was just thinking about when you said that, when and I've seen this exercise where they'll start at one end of the room, someone will whisper into someone's, ear something. And then by the time it gets to the end, it's totally changed.
Yeah, it's,
And
it's
that's
not even remotely related.
right, close to where it started. And that's kind of what you could potentially get with, like you say,
Yeah,
that translation piece that, people have an understanding of the department, what they
yeah,
do, but not down to the details
Yeah.
of what. And again, you may go back and forth because of that loss in translation,
Hmm.
because that person that thinking they're writing down the right notes or getting the most important
Well, they're
information,
just not listening and paying
or
attention
or
because
don't
they
know
think they
what to
already got it.
listen
Yeah.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
that too. Yeah. So there's yeah, you're right. That translation piece could be a
It's
very
critical.
a detriment to,
Hmm.
that success of that or that project or whatever you're doing, just because an interpretation is different
Hmm.
for everybody. So to not get it from the horse's mouth
Right, right.
could again change in so many ways.
When you said that, gave that example, it reminded me of that exact exercise. And the example that they gave was we need something like we need to fix the wing on this aircraft. And by the time we
Right.
got to the other end of the room, it was like we're ordering hamburgers for lunch. It's like
Right.
what?
Right.
That's not going to fix the aircraft. What aircraft?
That's what's funny though, again, because again, people are interpreting it as what they view as what's
Right.
important.
Yeah.
And again, so got to that whatever third or fourth person, they're like, man, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And didn't hear what the person just said. So it
There's
just
something about a rapper.
right. So that's we're joking about it, but
Yeah.
that's as simple as it could be, or
Yeah.
how it could change from one version of it to it getting
Hmm.
to the final place it needs to go. And that's even what happens when we're trying to articulate a new change or project based on how it is perceived or received by the individual at that lowest level. That doesn't pertain to me, but we're going to change our whole email system. You use email.
Right.
So I only use email once a year, once a month. It's
Yeah.
still going to affect you in some kind of way.
Yeah.
So even if you go to the greatest lengths to make sure that the right team is in place, and the other part of it could be the communication to the lowest level to the people who need it. Again, it may not think they need it. So it's and that's why I say when we brought up the bigger picture, it is much bigger than,
Yeah.
again, just writing out a plan or making sure the right people in the room. There are so many pieces of this that are important that a lot of times are overlooked or not understood, and so it's uh, we'd like to say that it's easy. It's not. But I think if you go into it with the intentions of including the right people, being open to, maybe some feedback, some criticism, input on,
Mhm.
what this could look like, I think you'll be better off. You all have that kind of mindset of let's make this the best we can. I think that'll help with some of those maybe unknowns or some of those variables that you hadn't considered. You're
Mhm.
just leaving it open to, again, possibilities of it changing, of it
Right.
altering. But you'd rather do that maybe in the development phase and creation phase versus, like you say, start down this path. Or let's create all these things and realize, oh crap, that's not the right stuff. We
Right.
got to do
Right.
this all over again.
All over again. Yeah.
So it's so
We all love
again,
to do rework.
right. So yeah.
so, so we're down to the last couple of minutes of our podcast. Joe, what are your final thoughts? What do you want to leave with our viewers and listeners
Again, I
as
think,
it pertains to the bigger picture?
well, again, we oftentimes think, we're in a silo. We're doing it. This is the best way, and it may be the best way for you, your team, your department. But at the same time, we really need to try and link up how what I do impacts the bigger picture. How do I fit into that puzzle? That's what we really need to think about, because I was in that mindset of what we do is all important. I don't care about all that other stuff. And it wasn't until I stepped away from that thing I was doing to see how it, affected someone else in another area. That's when I really began to think about, okay, so if I'm doing this, how does it impact everyone else? So if you really think about that in terms of you got a job, a mission or whatever it is, just really think about when we've said this before, you're not doing this alone. If you're part of an organization, it is going to impact the other part of the organization in some kind of way. So trying to understand what that is will, again, give you that opportunity to really think about the big picture.
Yeah. Absolutely. What a great summary for the podcast and some great suggestions for to keep in mind. So with that, we want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for watching and listening to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. If you have any ideas or any topics that you'd like us to consider discussing, or if you know someone who'd be potentially a good guest speaker for us, we're always open minded to the possibilities. And with that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.